All right. So, in an attempt to mitigate this perfectionist mentality that I have, what I'm trying to do is let myself be recorded without it being perfect. I think there's some staticky stuff going on, but I'm just going to do it anyway. So, I was messing around with AI, and what I wanted to do was I had this idea. I had this idea about helping schools integrate artificial intelligence into their curriculum so that they can learn how to use artificial intelligence. And the reason I wanted to do this was because I think artificial intelligence, and especially ChatGPT, is so powerful. Like, it's incredibly powerful to assist with certain tasks that we want to do, to help us come up with ideas or to elaborate on ideas or just to brainstorm. And it just has this immense power. So I was thinking, okay, well, how do I develop a curriculum in order to help schools integrate ChatGPT and artificial intelligence into what they do? And so I started off with that question. I asked ChatGPT, how can we help the younger generation use ChatGPT in a way that is wholesome, contributes to society, in a way that helps them express themselves, in a way that helps them create art that feeds their souls and speaks to others, and leaves the world better than we found it. And so it spit out a bunch of really great ideas. The first one was Introduction to AI and Ethics. And I was thinking, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But, ethics can be a difficult concept for children to grasp, or at least that's kind of what I was thinking at first. But so basically it says, begin by educating students about artificial intelligence and its ethical implications. Help them understand the responsibilities that come with using AI and the potential impact on society. And so I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. So what are some examples of unethical reasons? And what are some examples of when AI was used for good? And so it gave me some really great examples, which were deep fakes. So there's instances of people getting calls from family members where their family member says, I'm in trouble, I need help, like, please I need money right now, please wire me money so that I can get out of this bind that I'm in. And it's not actually their family member. It's their voice run through an AI program, and a scammer is using a script to try and get this family member to send them money and scam them out of money. So they're using their family member's voice that they received somehow, whether through a phone call or whatever else, and they're trying to scam the family member out of money. So that was pretty crazy. Great example of a terrible way to use artificial intelligence. Some other things about AI-powered surveillance and how it uses to track individuals without their consent in violating privacy and civil liberties, using misinformation and propaganda to spread disinformation and influence public opinion, especially through elections. That's kind of creepy. But then there were some great ethical uses of AI. So healthcare diagnosis, using algorithms to analyze medical images like X-rays and MRIs to detect things like cancer at early stages. So that's, also like disaster response being used to using AI to predict natural disasters and manage emergency response efforts to optimize resource allocation during crisis. Saves tons of lives and is a beautiful way to respond to emergencies. AI is used to monitor and protect the environment by tracking deforestation, wildlife populations, climate change patterns. Another great use. Language translation for people that have language barriers. And of course, education enhancement, which is what I was going off of. And so, having this stark contrast between these are ways that AI can be used unethically, and then there are ways where AI can be used very ethically and in a way that can contribute to society. And so the question that I was then bubbling up inside my head was, okay, well, obviously we can't stop everyone from using AI in an unethical or harmful way, but how can we best set kids up to have a strong moral compass? Like, how can we teach them to trust themselves to make the right decisions that are helpful instead of harmful? How do we show them how to make decisions that bring their lives toward harmony instead of disharmony? And so it gave out some really amazing answers to these questions. And so the first question, which was, how do we instill a strong moral code? And obviously all of these questions are geared towards how do we give these kids the best chance at making the world a better place? And in doing so, helps them feel good about who they are. And yeah. So instilling a strong moral code in kids, leading by example. So that first shows us, right? It talks about us. We have to show children how to be ethical by being ethical ourselves, by being empathetic and being kind in our own actions and our own behaviors. The next was open communication. Encourage open and honest conversations with children about moral and ethical topics. Answer their questions and engage in discussions about values, ethics, and consequences of actions. So this is huge because we're introducing ethical dilemmas to kids. And not that they, I guess the thought of should kids be, exposed to ethical dilemmas? And I think the answer is yes, not to such a drastic or extensive degree, but in terms of like the way, so the next part that they shared was like share stories, books, and fables that contain moral lessons and ethical dilemmas. Discuss the characters' choices and the outcomes of their decisions. So stories and literature are a beautiful way to introduce kids to these sort of ethical decisions that characters make so that they can put themselves in their shoes and say like, well, what would I do in that situation? And so that they can start to learn how to think critically about certain decisions that will inevitably come up in their lives. Teaching empathy. Help children understand and empathize with the feelings and perspectives of others. Encourage them to consider how their actions impact those around them. So again, stories and literatures are a great way to introduce this concept to kids. When a character goes through a traumatic experience and the child can put themselves in their shoes and say, like, oh wow, I imagine that happening to me. That would be really hard. And then seeing how the character reacts versus how the child might react if they were in that situation. And is to have these discussions with the kids about what they would do. Like, what would you do in that situation? And, we saw how this turned out for the character. How do you think it would turn out for you if you chose the same or if you chose differently? And just gets kids thinking about, what could happen. And also, this is the practice of reflection. It's indirectly, we are having kids reflect on another character's experience. So when they do this, they are practicing the art of reflection so that in their lives, again, they can look back on their own decisions and look back on how those outcomes played out, how it made them feel, how it made other people feel, what kind of effect it had on them, and how would they want to choose differently, if at all, in the future. And then here's another great idea. Discuss real-life situations using real-life examples from news stories, movies, daily life to discuss ethical issues and decision-making. Role-playing. So actually playing out scenarios where children can practice making ethical decisions and understanding the consequences of their choices. So like if we had some kids together and we had some scenarios for them to play out with, possible consequences of certain actions. And something that's coming to me is after the ethical decisions have been made and consequences have been fulfilled, how do you deal with those consequences? Maybe some shame or guilt or frustration or anger or other difficult emotions will arise. And so how do we help children process these things and understand what they're feeling so that the experience doesn't become more traumatic than it needs to be? A lot of these traumatic experiences that kids go through as children will form their belief system. They will form patterns of behavior that go on the rest of their life because the traumatic experience was not resolved or processed fully. So, for example, when let's say there was some kids doing a trust fall exercise, and when a certain child, let's say Tyler, went up to do his turn for the trust fall, there was some bullies in the class that convinced everyone that it would be funny to not catch Tyler in this trust fall exercise. And so Tyler gets up there and he goes to do the trust fall, and the bullies pull away and everyone else pulls away to follow in, and Tyler falls and he hurts himself. And not only does he hurt himself physically, but emotionally, he now has this deep sense of distrust that he feels like he can't trust anybody. The people he relied on or wanted to trust let him down and hurt him. And so now he carries with him this pattern of not wanting to trust people for fear of being let down or hurt. So that's just an example of a difficult pattern that's developed from not processing trauma fully. And that would assume that Tyler didn't have a good role model or a mentor of some sort to help him understand what he was feeling, so that instead of letting go and processing those emotions, he held on to them, and he kept them with him, which then created this pattern of distrust that goes on to his relationships and even his relationship with himself. Yeah, so it just gave a bunch of really great ideas. Also talked about balance, teaching children the importance of balance in life, helping them prioritize values like family, health, education, kindness. And I guess I would elaborate on that concept of balance in terms of giving real world examples of balance, like showing how ecosystems balance themselves out, showing how nature balances itself out, and how balance is important to how nature operates and how we operate, and what happens when we get out of balance, when we push too far on things like work or even exercise, or not resting, or resting too much, or not working enough, and seeing how we get out of balance and what kind of effects that causes for us. It also gave suggestions about mindfulness and self-reflection, respect for others' opinions, cultures, and beliefs. Teach children to approach differences with curiosity and respect. Hell yeah, that's amazing. Help children to understand the importance of building positive relationships and connections within their community. Encourage them to contribute to a harmonious society. Cultivating gratitude to help foster a sense of harmony and contentment. And of course, again, leading by example. So I threw in some other questions, or I guess maybe more of a statement. And the statement was answering my own question and seeing how the ChatGPT responds to it. And so basically I said, in order to teach kids how to have a strong moral compass, we must show them how to do it. And I do this by checking in with myself and asking myself these questions. Does this bring harmony to the situation? Am I acting in accordance with my values, which are being honest, doing good, not harming others, speaking the truth, and doing my best? And it echoed for me that these are important examples to give children. And it said you can do this by narrating your decision-making process in front of children. So when you're faced with your own ethical choices, verbalize your thought process. Explain to the children why you're making a particular decision and how it aligns with your values. Discuss dilemmas. Share your own moral dilemmas and how you resolved them, giving examples of your own life. Encourage children to engage in these discussions and offer their perspectives. You know, like, if you had this happen, what would you do? You know, kind of like bring their awareness back to themselves so that they can become aware of what's happening within them when you discuss these things, and also bring in that sense of like critical thinking and their own intuition. Admit mistakes. When you make a mistake or a decision that doesn't align with your values, acknowledge it. Use these moments as opportunities to demonstrate accountability, apologize if necessary, and discuss how to make amends. This is going to be one of the biggest gifts that I give to my children. In my upbringing, in my childhood, there was not a lot of repair of the relationship. There was plenty of rupture. There was plenty of times where I did something wrong, or maybe even my parents reacted or did something wrong, and they did not apologize. They did not even explain what was wrong besides that it was bad or maybe even sinful to do the things that I was doing. And so then there was discipline. And because I didn't understand the reason fully for the discipline, besides that it was bad or sinful, I became very angry. I was so frustrated at them because they were inflicting on me this pain and not explaining, not giving me any justification that made sense to me. And that's just the way that it went for years. So I harbored a lot of anger, a lot of resentment towards them, towards the world. And what it did most of all was not give me the opportunity to repair, to see what it means to repair a relationship with somebody. Because when I was disciplined, there was that rupture. And even if my parents made a mistake, there wasn't an admittance of fault. There was no apologizing. There was no reconciliation for the anger, the sadness, the hurt that I was feeling. This, like I said, is going to be the gift that I give my children. This is what I'm going to do that my parents did not know how to give me, which is to explain to my children as simply as possible the reason for doing the things that I do. And especially when I react out of anger, out of ignorance, out of something that is inappropriate towards my children, I will own it. I will speak to it. I will take responsibility for it. I will say, hey, remember when I did this and it hurt you and it made you upset? I did this because, well, first I'll say I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I hurt you. I'm sorry that I treated you that way. I did this because I was upset, or maybe I was feeling unsafe, and I wanted to control the situation, so I acted in anger. And in that anger, it hurt you. And I'm sorry. The anger came from me feeling unsafe and wanting to protect you. But I know that that's not a good way to protect you. In fact, it hurts you, maybe even more than the original situation. So I'm sorry for that. I commit to, in the future, not responding, to not respond in that way, so that I can be a better father to you. And that's how I would like to handle those situations. Just being brutally honest, brutally vulnerable, and committing to being better in the future, and saying how I'm going to do that. This is how I've repaired relationships with friends, and especially my wife. And this is how I plan to repair that relationship with my children inevitably when it does rupture, because I am human, and there will be times where I am unaware and unable to act in the way that I want to act, a way that I believe will bring harmony. But this is all part of it. These ruptures and repairs are actually really important because somehow the rupturing provides the opportunity to repair, which then somehow makes the relationship stronger. It shows that my children can trust me, that my partner can trust me to take responsibility, to be mature and become that safe space again. So what was really interesting about this journey was that it started out as a idea to help kids in school use AI to take advantage of its power so that they can get ahead in life. But what it resulted in was me becoming aware that this is so powerful and can be used for things that are not good. And so my worry became, okay, well, how do we be responsible about this? How do we give these kids the best chance of using artificial intelligence for good? And the answers kind of became, well, we have to model that, and we have to give examples, and we also have to teach kids how to how to find out their own values. We have to trust them that their nature is good, and help them find their values, assuming that they are good, assuming that their values are good. And then helping them reinforce and understand why. It's kind of like what I do with coaching, is like, I assume that there is an intelligence inside of you that is good by nature and knows what it needs and knows what's best. And what gets clouded, what happens usually with most people, myself included, is that our judgment, our discernment, our ideas, our nature gets clouded by fear. It gets clouded by trauma, fear developed from trauma. And it creates this mistrust, this distrust in ourselves. So ideally, what we would want is to teach kids from the earliest age possible what I don't want to indoctrinate them necessarily in, what we perceive to be good values, but there has to be some level of that, I suppose, in like, I will teach you what I think is best, but I will also encourage you for you to find what is best. That's one of my values. One of my values is helping you to think critically and find what you think is best and find your own values. And while we're figuring out what your values are, I will share my values with you. And I, to some degree, assume that my values of honesty, that my values of trusting myself will bring as much harmony as possible to myself and my child and our relationship. And so what this, it started out as like, how do we get kids to be able to use and take advantage of artificial intelligence, set themselves up for a good future? And the answer was, well, first, we should probably instill the best moral compass in kids so that they can use these things for good and have the perspective and the knowledge of basically anything that they do to have it be for good, to help it bring society towards harmony. And so it brought up another observation that I've kind of come to, which was that like we have generally, what I see in a lot of people is a deep sense of mistrust for ourselves. We don't have the habit of checking in with ourselves for one reason or another, of trusting ourselves. The habit of checking in with ourselves is clouded by fears and unconscious patterns, resulting in decisions that perpetuate the current state of unhappiness. For example, you're faced with a decision, let's say to go climb Mount Everest. Whatever. You say, I'm scared of what might happen if I choose X over Y. Or you'll have this unconscious pattern that's running in the background, and you won't even really consider doing another option because you've always done something a certain way. Being afraid to choose something is basically allowing fear to decide for you what will happen and what will be in your future. Or you think something bad will happen and you don't want that to happen because you want to feel good. Or you can't see how the situation ends if you make the decision. So all of these questions come up, and it's overwhelming to think about, how this will turn out, because you can't see, you don't know, the unknown. So you won't even allow that opportunity to be planted for that fear of overwhelm. So this brings up the idea of sometimes thinking through things through is really helpful. It can prevent really unnecessary situations from happening. For example, picking up a hitchhiker. So you could say, well, I don't want to pick up a hitchhiker because I don't know who this person is. And, maybe they're crazy. Maybe they'll hurt me. And so, yeah, that's worth thinking about sometimes. But what I think that I'm looking for, ideally, is a balance between thinking things through and trusting that things will work out. Not thinking things through, aka unintentionally trusting everything, it can bite you in the ass. Not thinking through investments, not putting in safeguards for investments can make you lose a lot of money. So not thinking those things through can put you in a really precarious situation. However, Not taking chances or thinking through everything too much will paralyze you. It'll basically make you stuck. You won't be anywhere because you're not taking any chances. You'll probably just stay in whatever level of unhappiness that brought you to this situation in the first place. Even if you think things through, there's no guarantee that it will turn out the way that you want it. In fact, some pretty unpredictable, crazy factors could happen anyway. So there's no guarantee of a desired outcome, even if you think things all the way through. My practice is to allow a plan or opportunity to present itself and see if it aligns with my values. If it does, then ideally I take action on it. That doesn't always happen because I have my own fears and insecurities and ignorances that get in the way, my own patterns that will stop me from taking action. In fact, this video was one of those patterns that I'm working on breaking. So my example of this video was I heard some staticky noise in this microphone, and I thought, well, if I can't get rid of this static, I might as well not even make the video. And that was like some sort of like perfectionist pattern that didn't want to let me put this information out there, to put myself out there. Maybe I was afraid of how people would perceive me. Maybe I was afraid of what kind of response I would get. And so who knows where that fear came from, but it was going to stop me from even recording this. And so by challenging that pattern, by just recording this anyway, even though I don't have my script perfectly ready, even though I don't have, everything lined up to make it flow nicely, I'm just doing it. So I'm practicing what my ideal practice would be, which is here's the opportunity, here's the idea. Let's think a little bit. I got my stuff together, I got my camera together and my notes, but let's not think about it too much. Let's take some action. And trust that it's going to work out. So that's what I got. I don't really know where this idea is going anymore because, I did ask the ChatGPT, can we instill morals and ethics in tandem with teaching artificial intelligence capabilities? And ChatGPT responded yes. And I tend to think that's also true. The thing is, we don't have a class in school, in grade school, that really emphasizes emotional intelligence, a class that emphasizes ethics, morality, and helps kids exercise their critical thinking in terms of how they would respond to real life situations. Or from that previous idea of giving kids stories of ethical dilemmas in the form of fiction so that they can practice, so that they can put themselves in these sort of situations. that seems to be an incredibly important aspect of education that is missing. And I don't know where to start. Do we suggest to the schools, hey, I have this idea for curriculum that I think is missing? Do we just start our own school? Maybe Montessori schools are already doing this to a degree. How do we align ourselves to be a part of that wave and to bring that extra element of the human experience into everyday life? Yeah, that's where I'm at. Thanks for listening.